Welcome to the Upper Room. Great to be with you as always. We come to you from beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado. There are so many places we could film here and actually have filmed before. The Garden of the Gods and Focus on the Family. We could go to the Olympic Training Center. We've chosen to be right in front of Pikes Peak, kind of the trademark of this city, a beautiful 14,000 foot peak that people just fall in love with who live here in this area. I gotta tell you though, however, that Pikes Peak was not our first choice. Our first choice was the Air Force Academy, and it has to do with what we're gonna talk about today. You know that the Air Force Academy is a place where things are in order. Things are tidy. There are rules to follow. There are ways things are done, and they have this shiny image. So we thought, what a perfect place, because as you can tell by the title of our lesson, it's about chaos. So that would be the opposite of chaos. But the irony is that even in the midst of this culture trying to look like we have everything buttoned up and tidy and nice and orderly, there is still chaos beneath the surface. And we found that out when we tried to get on to the academy, which we have been on that campus. It's a very large and beautiful campus. We've been on that campus before, and so we just thought, well, we'll just, get permission to come on campus and film. Not today. Not now. Why? Because of chaos in the world. We're at war with Iran, and they are not letting us on that campus, nor are they letting anyone that doesn't have permission from the Department of Defense. And so our plans went up in flames because of the chaos in the world. But even the Air Force Academy, as much as they would like to portray themselves to be a people and an organization of absolute order, we know that that's not the case. For example, last year, they had a scandal that involved 100 cadets. There are over 4,000 cadets on that campus. And if I turned around, I could see the campus here over my left shoulder. But they had a scandal, and it was a scandal where they found that over 100 cadets were cheating. Not only that, they had another scandal last year, one of sexual abuse and sexual harassment. And one cadet was found guilty and obviously booted off the campus and probably put in jail. But the truth of the matter is, this has been going on for a long time. Historically, if you look back in the years of 1965, 1967, 2007, those are all years where great scandals broke out at the Air Force Academy. Okay, it's just one of the branches of the military, as you know, and it's true of all of the branches of the military. Now, it's true to a great extent that the armed forces are really orderly in how they do things, and yet there's chaos beneath the surface. Okay, so because of the chaos in the world, we cannot be on their campus right now. Maybe another time. The next best thing then is just to be in front of Pikes Peak. But today is about the idea of chaos and how it affects our lives and how it is evident almost everywhere we turn. And the question becomes, what do people who are people of the kingdom, people like you and me, what do we do in the midst of the chaos? Is it really chaotic? And of course, our culture does everything we can do to make things appear as though they are nice and tidy and clean and a shiny image. But you and I both know that chaos is the order of the day, and we'll see that in our text today. Of course, we're in the series we're calling Dynamic, and we're in Acts chapter 19, if you'll turn there. It's Paul's third missionary journey. He's in Ephesus, and what we see in this text, although we're not going to unpack it verse by verse all the way through, it's fairly lengthy, but I will give you the narrative. We'll read part of it together, and it's simply something that is a story that is really interesting, but I believe it is about chaos. And as we watch it unfold, you'll see what I'm talking about. And so let's jump into it in chapter 19 and beginning in verse 23. The phrase that comes to mind when I think of chaos in this world is that decay is the rule of the day. We know it in the science world as the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy. We'll talk more about that, but it is that reality that in this world things break down, things devolve, things decay, organization goes to disorganization, and it brings us to chaos. So in this lesson, and I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, I always say we will, and it never seems to happen, but in this lesson we'll see the horrific truth of life and the terrific truth of life. We begin with the horrific truth of life, and it begins in verse 23. About that time, serious trouble developed in Ephesus concerning the way. You know, that is a name, the name given to the followers of Jesus, the church, the early church. But serious trouble developed. It began with Demetrius, a silversmith who had a large business manufacturing silver shrines of the Greek goddess Artemis. He kept many craftsmen busy. Okay, so this is a CEO, if you will, of a business, a very large business, and it was very large because it all revolved around the worship of Artemis. Artemis was the main god. She was actually the goddess that people worshipped in the Roman Empire. There are over 33 shrines in the Roman Empire, and the temple to Artemis, the goddess, resided there in Ephesus. And so life revolved around Artemis. Life revolved around the worship of Artemis, and therefore they had to have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of idols that represented Artemis. And this guy had a thriving business where he created those idols, and all of a sudden he has an issue because something is disrupting his business. And so the worship of Artemis is the largest cult in the Roman Empire, and this temple in Ephesus is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Now, I don't know what image in our culture would be likened to the image of Artemis. Maybe it'd be the swoosh of Nike or the smile of Amazon, something like that, that we just recognize and pretty much adore. And people have made hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, off of those images. So you have kind of an understanding of what we're talking about here, and why Demetrius is a little upset about what's going on. We go on to verse 25. He called everyone together along with the others employed in similar trades. So he even called maybe some other competitors together, and he addressed them. And he said this, "Gentlemen, you know that our wealth comes from this business." Okay? We all know that. Our livelihood, our wealth, our prosperity, it's about this business. I don't want us to fly past that. Our wealth. What was most important to them? Our wealth. Boy, it sure sounds a lot like modern day America, doesn't it? Everything seems to be about our wealth, our power. And if anything affects our wealth, I mean, people study the stock market. At some point you wonder if it's more important than our own health. Certainly more important than our spiritual health. But our wealth really dictates our life. And that idea of our wealth ignites a firestorm now. But we in the kingdom should understand that our lives do not revolve around our wealth, although a lot of us still seem to fall into that pit. Did Jesus say anything about that? Of course he did. In Matthew 6:19, "Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal." Don't accumulate wealth, Jesus says. He just says it flat out. Not one of our favorite verses in America. Luke 12:15, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Okay? Now, the problem is, for us in America, is that Jesus is always right. He's always right. We've said this so many times. And he's still right. And because these people in Ephesus have their life revolving around the wealth that comes from the worship of Artemis, that creates a problem, as does it for many of us. So we move on to verse 26. Demetrius continues with this speech. But as you have seen and heard, this man Paul has persuaded many people that handmade gods aren't really gods at all. Can you imagine that? He continues, and he's done this not only here in Ephesus, but throughout the entire province. I mean, this guy's a real problem. What is Demetrius saying? He's saying something that we might relate to, and that is, you're saying I have no life? That the life I have that's built around wealth and entertainment and prosperity and things, you're saying that that's no life at all? What? That's what Demetrius is saying. This idea that these handmade gods are not gods at all? Well, that's outlandish. He moves on. Verse 27. Of course, I'm not just talking about the loss of public respect for our business. I'm also concerned that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will lose its influence, and that Artemis, this magnificent goddess worshipped throughout the province of Asia and all around the world, will be robbed of her great prestige. I'm concerned about her, our wonderful goddess, our cult. That's what I'm concerned about. Those Ephesians were so backwards, weren't they? Can you imagine worshiping a goddess? Making a goddess the center of your life and referring to her all the time as how important she is. We would never send up a space rocket to go around the moon called Artemis II. Or would we? We still refer to that goddess as important. Where did that come from? There was a guy, by the way, this is kind of a side note, but it's a lot of fun. In 1960, a guy by the name of Abe Silverstein, and he was the director of space flight development for NASA, and it was on his shoulders to come up with a name for the space program. One night he realized, having that pressure, this is really important, this is a big deal in 1960, I better come up with something really cool. He went home and he picked up a book and thumbed through it, and it was a book on mythology. And he came upon the god Apollo. And the Apollo project began, followed by the Mercury project, or one came before the other, and now we're here with Artemis. From 2,000 years ago, we still refer to Artemis as a very important thing. They weren't backwards, they were just like us. So, my question to you, it's not really a discussion question, but I want you to ponder it. Are Greek gods simply mythical figures? Or could they be more than that? Could they be demonic? I take you back to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 15. But Israel soon became fat and unruly. You could be talking about America, right? Fat and unruly. The people grew heavy, plump, and stuffed. Isn't that a great line? Feels like it's talking about me. Anyway, then they abandoned the God who made them. They made light of the rock of their salvation. They stirred up his jealousy by worshiping foreign gods. Is there anything wrong with that? They provoked his fury with detestable deeds. They offered sacrifices to demons, which are not God, to gods they had known before, to new gods only recently arrived, to gods their ancestors had never feared. You see a connection. These gods are in fact demonic. They're not just fun stories, fairy tales. The worship of these gods is the worship of the demonic. And so what we have here in Ephesus is the beginning of a fire that starts because of the spiritual conflict. Up until now, they have been fine with demonic worship. They would never have called it demonic worship, but it is, to worship anything but the one true God. And then Paul shows up on the scene and says, no, there's one true God, and what you're doing, that's no God at all. And that's why Demetrius is a little sensitive. You're saying what we do is demonic worship, but worse, you're really impacting our economy? You can't do that. Back to our text, verse 28. At this, their anger boiled, and they began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" Their anger boils. Why? Because anytime you bring light into darkness, darkness, we are told by John, hates it. Hates the light. And that's what Paul has done. And so, what we now see is chaos erupts. Verse 29, soon the whole city was filled with confusion. Part of chaos is confusion. They did not let us on the Air Force Base because they don't want any confusion about who's for us and who's against us, I guess. But confusion is really a trademark of chaos. It was filled with confusion. Everyone rushed to the amphitheater, dragging along Gaius and Aristarchus, who were Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia. See, this is guilty by association. Now, Paul wanted to go too, but the believers would not let him. Some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, also sent a message to him begging him not to risk his life by entering the amphitheater. Inside, the people were all shouting, some one thing and some another. I love this line, verse 32. Everything was in confusion. In fact, most of them didn't even know why they were there. Doesn't that feel like our culture? When you see these protests and rallies going on, most of them don't even know why they're there. When they're interviewed, they kind of go, I don't know. I've been told to hold this sign up. Nothing has changed in 2,000 years. Jump down to verse 35. At last, craziness goes on. At last, the mayor of Ephesus steps to the forefront, and he has some ability about what really should happen here. Instead of stringing these people up because they're impacting our wealth, at last the mayor was able to quiet them down enough, and he said this, citizens of Ephesus, everyone knows that Ephesus is the official guardian of the temple of the great Artemis. We can all agree on what our life is about. Whose image fell down to us from heaven. That actually is historically what people believed when a meteor showered down from heaven, like in 200 or 300 BC, and they assumed it was the goddess Artemis who had fallen. So we worship Artemis, since this is an undeniable fact. Have you ever heard that before? Evolution is an undeniable fact. You can't even argue about it. You should stay calm and not do anything rash. Calm down, okay? The voice of reason. Let's not upset everything and get ourselves into trouble, and that's what he's now going to address. And I'm going to read it because it's really interesting. He is the consummate politician, trying to make everyone happy here. Verse 37, you have brought these men here, but they have stolen nothing from the temple. They've not spoken against our precious goddess. I put in the word precious there. If Demetrius and the craftsmen have a case against them, the courts are in session, and the officials can hear the case at once. Let them make formal charges, and if they are complaining about other matters, they can be settled in a legal assembly. I'm afraid we're in danger of being charged with rioting by the Roman government, since there is no cause for all this commotion. And if Rome demands an explanation, we won't know what to say. Then he dismissed them and they dispersed. What's he saying? Can I remind you that the privileges we have given to us by our precious government Rome could go up in smoke if we have riots? They will not put up with this. So he calms them down. They all disperse. But the point I want to make here is that is a picture of how quickly chaos can rule the day. Decay of order can rule the day in a culture. Now, we have many times referred to this, and I want to touch on it again, that the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy, has to do with this idea that things do not get better as time goes on, they deteriorate as time goes on, correct? Now we understand that the scientists of our day, for a long time now, and then they have influenced the government, that have taught that no, things get better. You have to have things getting better all the time or you can't have evolution. And they can't give up on evolution because evolution supports there is no God that we answer to, so we can become gods. And all of our children have grown up in this culture understanding and believing for the most part in evolution, which goes directly against the second law of thermodynamics and the law of entropy. But hey, we can't talk about that, can we? I'm suggesting to you, I'm proposing to you that the second law of thermodynamics and the law of entropy doesn't just apply to science and to the physical realm. I think it applies in societies as well, and in the spiritual realm for sure, because it is the demonic. It is that realm that hates God, that wants things to deteriorate. And it is the natural order of things since the fall. So entropy, officially, is the constant and irreversible degradation of matter and anything in the universe to increasing disorder. Okay? It's just a law. It's the law of the gravity. It's just the way things are, but we have to ignore it so we can pretend like there's no God, right? And we can come up with another theory as to how we got to where we are. We're just getting better and better and better. But you and I both know things don't get better and better. You buy a brand new car. Does it get even better than 10 years after you had it? No, it gets worse. Your clothes get worse. Everything gets worse over time. And it's certainly true of this world since the fall. Psalm 102:25, long ago you laid the foundations of the earth and made the heavens with your hands. They will perish, but you remain forever. They will wear out like old clothing. You will change them like a garment and discard them. He's talking about the universe and how this planet and everything we see will wear out like clothes that just wear out and need to be replaced. Isaiah 51:6. Look up to the skies above and gaze down on the earth below. For the skies will disappear like smoke and the earth will wear out like a piece of clothing. That is what Scripture says. Not things get better. Things get worse. And they get worse in the natural sense, right? Pikes Peak is beautiful, but it's wearing down and it someday will be destroyed, right? Everything in this world is that way. I think societies are that way. I think relationships tend to be that way unless something incredibly dramatic changes that natural way of order. J.C. Sanford is a PhD and a professor at Cornell University, and a few years ago he wrote a book entitled Genetic Entropy, and the idea behind it is this: the genomes of all living creatures are slowly degenerating. Okay? He just says that's the way it goes. And that's what they're saying about this earth. When they're honest, it's all unraveling and falling apart. So, only discussion question for the day: what evidence do you see in our world, in our society, in our culture, that things are unraveling, they're decaying? Have a great discussion. Well, I'll give you three right off the top of my head. The first has to do with what we just experienced as we try to get into the Air Force Academy campus, and that is that many people believe we're on the precipice of World War III if we're not already there. The political realm of our world seems to be unraveling quickly. We just experienced, like a week or two ago, the No Kings protest, where hundreds of thousands of maybe millions, they said, protest they don't want a king. No kings, no kings, right? We know what they're protesting. They hate the orange guy. But the reality is they're saying something much deeper and more permanent than that. I don't want any king in my life, and that includes Jesus. It's decaying. Nobody wants anybody to rule over them. But that's the natural order of things. And of course you have the gender transitioning phenomena, if you will, and that is truly the decay of people's identity and who they believe themselves to be, and people destroying children, literally destroying them. If only Jesus had something to say about all this. Oh, here we go. Mark chapter 9, verse 42. He wasn't silent on this idea of destroying our children, trying to convince them, it's a mistake that you're a boy or that you're a girl. If you cause one of these little ones who trusts in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone hung around your neck. Okay, Jesus says, don't you dare harm these children. And that's what we're doing. It's not that I want to be over repetitive, but I think repetition is the best way to learn. So we go back to our God, and that He is truly a God of order. And that's why disorder, decay, the destruction of society and this world is the way things go when Satan's in charge. And he is in charge on this earth to the extent that God allows him to be in charge. But I want to give you some examples of that. The finely tuned universe, of course. I read recently where the spiral galaxies are not just swirling stars, they are written in the language of mathematics, a language that only a mind could invent. Another way of order that we experience is the earth is the perfect distance from the sun. And of course, the earth is perfect in its tilt and rotation and all that it has to be in order to survive. It is called the perfect planet with the perfect balance of water and oxygen and everything that we talked about in the past. The earth could not continue to exist if it was any larger or any smaller, again, any more distant from the sun or closer to the sun. Another one is the precise nature of the human body, clear down to the factory that is our 37 trillion cells that are constantly replacing themselves. It's so finely tuned. If your blood becomes even slightly more acidic, a condition known as acidosis can occur. If it becomes too alkaline, it leads to alkalosis. Both conditions are dangerous, and if not corrected, can be life-threatening. This highlights how critical it is for your body to maintain this balance with extraordinary precision. Your nose can detect 1 trillion different scents. Your tongue is like your fingerprint, totally unique to you, and contains 2,000 to 8,000 taste buds. The human eye is one of the most extraordinary biological systems ever studied. It contains around 120 million photoreceptors. And the deeper we explore life at its most fundamental level, the more we encounter not randomness, but organized complexity, coordination, and purpose. Dr. James Tour, the renowned scientist and Messianic Jew, says if you really study science, it will bring you closer to God, the Creator, because it's all about order. But in the midst of that, because Satan is the prince of this world, disorder and decay rule the day. So that's enough about the horrific truth. The horrific truth is things are not going to get better, no matter how much they promise it will. You know, it doesn't matter who it is that they are. It will not get better. It will continue to unravel. That's a horrific truth. It's true about our bodies as well, as we've documented, and you, as you live longer and longer, and I live longer and longer, can document how it's unraveling, falling apart. That's a horrific truth. Now to the good news, the terrific truth. And to do that, we're going to turn, I'm going to ask you to turn anyway, to Romans chapter 8, one of the most remarkable chapters in the entire Bible. And we're going to focus in on a few verses that are maybe the most remarkable of chapter 8 of Romans, all right? I'm going to read through it, and then we're going to give you some bullet points to understand what we just read, and we'll wrap it up. So here we go, Romans chapter 8, starting in verse 18. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory He will reveal to us later. For all creation, okay, so here we're back into this idea of what's happening in all of creation. For all creation is waiting eagerly, that word means straining forward or on tiptoe. Our creation is actually on tiptoe, isn't that great? For that future day when God will reveal who His children really are. Against its will, all creation was subjected to God's curse. But with eager hope, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. So when we read here, if you miss this, let me point it out right away. When it talks about creation and all creation, he's not even talking about humanity. He's talking about Pikes Peak. He's talking about this earth. And this earth will someday join us in how we've been redeemed. And this earth can't wait for that day. Until then, it's a matter of unraveling and decay. He goes on, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay, for we know that all creation has been groaning. Great word there. It's the word stenazo, and it means the utterances of someone caught in a dreadful situation and has no immediate prospect of deliverance. The earth groans, just like I groan when I stand up. I don't think I'm going to get delivered from this. But, I'm forgetting. Even though the earth groans for the day, not sure it's ever going to come, but it will come when we will be delivered, as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. And we believers, we followers of Christ, we who trust in Christ, we who put our confidence in Jesus also groan. Well, there it is. We groan. It's okay to groan. I groan more and more every day. We groan even though we have the Holy Spirit within us as a foretaste of future glory. For we long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering. We too wait with eager hope. There it is, the cure. We must wait with eager hope for the day when God will give us our full rights as His adopted children, including the new bodies He has promised us. We were given this hope when we were saved. If we already have something, we don't need to hope for it. But if we look forward to something we don't have yet, we must wait patiently and confidently. The cure to the chaos is we must continue to be patient and hopeful in our waiting process, is what he says. Okay, I'm going to run down 7 truths from that passage. There's so much there, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. In your discussion time, I want you to spend a lot of time on these 7 truths. Here they are. These are in that passage we just read from Romans chapter 8. Number 1, present suffering is nothing in comparison to the glory we will experience. You just got to believe that. You got to trust that whatever we're dealing with as we decay, it's nothing compared to the glory that awaits us. Number 2, all creation can't wait to be freed from the fallenness. As Jesus said, as he rode into Jerusalem, if these people are shut up, the rocks will cry out. You see, Jesus was saying, the rocks, the earth can't wait to be redeemed. Number 3, God understands why we groan when it comes to our fallenness. Isn't that great news? We do groan, and then we feel bad. I'm sorry, Lord. He understands. And that's part of Jesus coming to this earth and being wrapped in an earth suit, and that is, he understands why we groan. He groaned. Number 4, we've been given the Spirit as a deposit, a seal, a foreshadowing of future glory. That's part of the deal with having the Spirit of God in us. It's the deposit. He's the reminder. There's something greater coming. Number 5, we were given hope when we were saved. Okay? When you and I came to know Jesus and experienced salvation, hope entered into our life. And we have more hope, we should have, more hope than anyone else in the entire world. Number 6, we must wait patiently and confidently. And number 7, God cannot lie. I'm adding that one on as the umbrella over this whole passage. He cannot lie. If you're thinking, is God fudging with us? No. He is trustworthy. What he says will happen. It will absolutely happen. And to see that in Scripture, I take you to Hebrews chapter 6, verse 17, and it will contain what's become one of my favorite verses. But here we go. Verse 17, now when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without any question, that oath is binding. God also bound himself with an oath, so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. Perfectly sure. Verse 18, so God has given both his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie. When people say God can do everything, he can do anything, that's not true. He cannot lie. Therefore, we who have fled to him, that's you and me, for refuge, can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. I want to go back to that verse 18, the end of it. We have great confidence. When I look around at people who name the name of Jesus, who claim to follow Jesus, who say they're part of the church, and they live lives of insecurity and doubt, I just don't understand it. We of all people have great confidence, not in ourselves, but we have great confidence in who God is and what He's doing and what He's gonna do. Why would I be insecure? It's not about what I look like, how my body's deteriorating, how much money I have. It's about Him and how He never lies and what He says is going to come true. That last verse, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. We are anchored. We don't drift. We don't float around. We don't get blown around. Do you see how great that is? Isn't this a great truth? This is a terrific truth when it comes to the chaos in which we live in this world. It is the answer to the chaos. So the incredible message, the truth here is we will go from suffering to glory, humiliation to exaltation. Isaiah 65:17, look, I'm creating new heavens and a new earth, and no one will even think about the old ones anymore. 2 Peter 3:10, but the day of the Lord will come as unexpectedly as a thief. Then the heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, and the very elements themselves will disappear in fire, and the earth and everything on it will be found to deserve judgment. Finally, John says in Revelation chapter 21, verse 1, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. This beauty behind me, as great as it is going to disappear. Something much greater is coming. And we have that as an anchor for our soul that we stand firm in. No need to be insecure or to worry or to be anxious or frightened about anything regarding the chaos of this world. It was December of 1927, off the northeast coast of the United States. A submarine had been given the title USS S4 Massachusetts, and just off the coast of Massachusetts, it was rammed by a Coast Guard ship, and it sank to the depths of 110 feet underneath the surface of the sea. Well, as rescuers dove down to see if they could save the 40 men who were entombed in that submarine through Morse code and banging on the hull of that ship, one of the divers, a man by the name of Thomas Eddy, heard this banging, this Morse code coming through from some of those who were trapped in the submarine. And what the message was that they were sending was this: is there any hope? To which he took out something hard, something metal, and he banged back on that ship in Morse code. Yes, there is hope. Everything possible is being done. However, because of severe weather, those 40 men were never saved. But I want to go back to what Thomas Eddy tapped back to them. Yes, there is hope. Everything possible is being done. That phrase could be what is being said in our culture. From governments to religions to celebrities to all the people who have all the answers. Yes, there's hope. We're doing all we can do. There is hope. But you and I know there is no hope outside of Jesus Himself and His promise to us. Our hope is tied to the reality that in the future, God has already promised us that everything will be new and there'll be no more decay, no more chaos, no more unraveling of our bodies, societies, and this planet. We don't need to save the earth. In fact, that is such a waste of time because God has it all under control. I go back to that verse once again. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Back in verse 24 of Romans 8, we were given this hope when we were saved. Our culture doesn't have a clue. Quit looking to our culture. It's a culture of chaos. It always has been, even though they put a pretty face on it, and it always will be. That's why I wanted to give you that great truth, that terrific truth out of Romans 8 and Hebrews 6. We have an anchor for our soul. Isn't that great stuff? In the city of Ephesus, things unraveled quickly. They brought him back under control for a while, and we can do that for a while, but chaos is the order of the day, but not for us. In the midst of the chaos, we have an anchor for the soul. Great stuff. Thanks for joining us here in Colorado Springs. Wish we were on the base, but we understand why. It's pretty chaotic right now. We love you. God bless you.